Who is the Black American woman expat, and why would a woman pick up and leave the country she was born and raised in, the country where she knows the language and how everything operates, and probably the place where her family still lives, to move abroad? I'm Stephanie Perry. I'm a year-round house sitter and the creator of House Sitter School and co-creator of Exodus Summit. I help Black women take a career break or move abroad through house sitting. And I have seen a serious increase in Black women creating the life of their dreams in a new country. It all starts with travel. Once we spend time in other countries and we see how other people live, we can look back at the United States critically and really see what's wrong here. In this country, we're expected to spend our entire adult life focused mainly on work. And we're expected to wait until we hit a magical number that tells us that now we get a chance to live for ourselves. I think waiting until you are retirement age to start really living is a scam. Black women in particular are expected to be the beasts of burden for an entire society, and Black women who have moved abroad have opted out of this racket. Black women are looking for a lower cost of living and a higher peace of mind. And this is what we're finding by leaving the United States. That peace of mind isn't just the result of spending less money to live. Think about how much more peaceful your life would be if you weren't surrounded daily by people who think it's their job to police Black people. Or if you actually could tell that people in power considered you deserving of the same treatment and protections as everyone else. You would feel safer. And you'd feel safer because you'd have better access to healthcare and less access to guns abroad. Black women expats are women who have taken time to examine what it is that they really want for their lives and then have decided to go out and get it. You already know the Jim Rohn quote, "If you don't like how things are, change it. You're not a tree." That advice applies to selecting your country too.
Hi, I'm your unerased host, Carolyn Malachi. The commentary you just heard was a great intro into this episode. More than a travel show, we're exploring the views and visions of Black expats. What makes people, especially Black women, decide to pick up, take wings, and land in another country? Mexico, Panama, France. They are finding tribes. The world is their canvas for bold color and new life. Their numbers are growing. But intentional Black flight from the U.S. is not new. It dates back 100 years to the so-called Roaring Twenties. Join us in this audio adventure to hear women who cast a vote for elsewhere, and their expat experience is no place like home.
I'm Audrey Edwards. I'm a journalist, writer, and the author of American Runaway, Black and Free in Paris in the Trump Years.
I am Julia Brown. I am the CEO and founder of Walking the Spirit Tours Black Paris and Beyond. I'm a historian and a storyteller.
Welcome, ladies. It is an honor to chat with you today. This episode is about Black women expatriates, or simply called expats. We want you to take us to Paris, which enjoyed a long and rich history of welcoming Black American expats dating back to the early 1900s. But before we delve into the fascinating history of Black women expats in Paris with Julia Brown, let's come closer to the present day. Shall we rewind to, say, November 2016? Donald Trump is elected president. Audrey Edwards, please take it from there.
Well, Donald Trump took me to Paris. I threatened when he first announced that he was running that if he got elected, which I never thought he would, I would leave the country. And I kept saying it kind of like a mantra or a chant to ward off evil spirits, but never for a minute did I think he was going to get elected. I had a game plan, and when he did get elected, I had to quickly put it in motion. I knew people in Paris. I knew a French landlord whose apartment, a little studio, was available. I called him right away. We negotiated a rent. And the day before Trump was to be inaugurated, it was actually 2 days before, January 18th, I was on an Air France flight heading to Paris.
Julia, you were born in the UK, raised in Canada, and moved to Paris in 1990. At that time, you confessed to knowing very little about Black American culture. Today, you are tour guide extraordinaire, storyteller, historian, expert of the Black expat in Paris. How did that happen?
When I confessed that I knew little about Black American culture, I've never lived it because I lived in Canada most of my life. Living in Canada, we know vicariously the American culture because we share the same media and we share our borders. We probably know more about America than we know about Canada, actually. Or it just seemed so much more interesting and more lively and more going on, and it influenced everything that happened in Canada. But what I didn't know was the extent to which the African American expatriate movement had happened, and who had gone, who had done what, and the influence that it still had. That I was very more or less unaware of. I knew little bits. I knew about Richard Wright. I knew James Baldwin. I knew Langston Hughes. I'd studied literature. But, just the details of it was surprising to me. And, when you think about Paris, you don't think about the history, but it's a city of refuge, and it's long been a city of refuge. So to find that out when I was there, the door just opened, and I found my reason for actually being there.
Let's touch on anti-Black racism in France. While some remark that the stink of white nationalism is not as strident in France, some would take exception to that. What say you two? Julia first, and then back to Audrey.
Wow, that's a tricky one. It's harder and harder for people to say it doesn't exist because it's very, very blatant. But if you go to certain areas, you're going to find more people of color than others. And then those people of color there are going to look maybe more impoverished, so you could see the status, and then if you dig deeper than that, then you know that there's economics and that, and so there's no way you can say there's no that the anti-Black racism isn't there, and it's not just anti-Black racism. And in France, there are people that are considered to be less favorable than you. So it really made me think about what it means to be North American, what it means to have the privilege of being a North American Black.
Thank you, Julia. Audrey.
I love how I feel in Paris. The big difference to me, and what I've always said about Paris and what I've always said about the French, is that they are not constantly reacting to my color. In America, race permeates everything. It permeates how things get reported. There is nothing discussed when it comes to demographics where race is not included. Americans, Black and white, and everyone in between, are obsessed with race. That is not the case in France. Racism exists everywhere. It's the degree, it's the quality, and it's what becomes your focus when you talk Black American history. It is a history that comes out of slavery. That basic feeling of inhumanity towards Blacks has become internalized in the American culture.
My name is Evita Turquoise Robinson. I am the founder and creator of No Madness Travel Tribe and No Madness Festival. No Madness started with 100 people, and we are just under 30,000 today. My community anointed me as leader and anointed itself as a real movement. After living in Asia for about a year and a half, coming back to the Bronx, New York, there was a community that was needed and a tribe that was needed for me just to be able to survive. Our economic incomes are all across the board. It's like literally a split pie. You know, we have backpackers all the way to people who are self-made millionaires. I don't follow the footsteps of anybody in my family. I'm still to this day very much the black sheep. And so I needed to find community, and the only way that I was going to be able to find it was to curate it. And so I think for me, it comes from answering the call and saying yes and allowing the community to teach me and to mold me and to push me. You know, I say there's two words that I take very seriously, leader and movement. And I feel like you can't really claim those two things until you're anointed them first. And so very soon after the creation of No Madness Travel Tribe, I would definitely say that, especially with my life experience in my 40 countries, we are more welcome than not in most places around the world. Put the fear in the back pocket long enough to just get on the plane. Fear always seems to be the thing, whether it's fear of food, fear of language, fear of whatever, because you'd be surprised how you show up for yourself when you are out into the world and you realize that you have way more control and autonomy than you thought you did.
Julia, you've helped unerased Black women speak tell stories of our ancestors. For listeners, you can find them at unerasedbws.com. Most of us know about Josephine Baker, but there were others who settled in Paris after World War I. One of my favorites is the saloon owner and entrepreneur, Bricktop. Can you give us a brief Black women's history lesson on the City of Lights?
Okay, so you're going to start with the badass, right? Her nickname is Bricktop, but her official name is Ada Beatrice Queen Victoria Virginia Louise Smith. That's right. She was from West Virginia.
Queen Victoria.
So she went to Paris and got there in 1924. We don't know if she actually was the one that was actually invited on a telegram that was sent out from a man called Eugene Boulard, who ran a nightclub, but she got the mess. She picked it up, she intercepted it, whatever. She made it hers. She made it work for her. She got there and she says, I'm going to be singing in Paris. I'm coming from New York, and this is my next step. And she's used to these big clubs, and she gets there and she gets to this little club. It barely holds 12 tables, and she goes, oh my goodness, what have I stepped into? Anyway, but there's a young fellow working in the back called Langston Hughes who comes. He says, all right, now sit down, don't cry. Just, take a cup of tea and we're good. And she takes that moment, she turns it around because she has a personality that welcomes people. She's inclusive. Even coming from the United States in the 1920s, where she wanted to own her own club, but there's no way she was going to own a club. But getting to Paris, she's inclusive. Everybody can come and take part of it. So the people that you find in her club are like eventually in her bigger club, but she moves on. She could find movie stars, like American movie stars. You find people like Cole Porter and writers, F. Scott Fitzgerald. You find, the Prince of Wales. But in the background, you see young fellows like Stéphane Grappelli and Django Reinhardt, who have become icons in French music. So all these people are swirling around her, but she's opening the door for women musicians, like Valeda Snow and Mabel Mercer and all these women to come in, and her place is a safe place for people. So when you pointed her out, Carolyn, as sort of the center of everything, she really is the kind of the center of the wheel around which the culture of 1920s Paris circles. After World War I, when it's just been 4 years of absolute deprivation. So now's the time to set free, and that's to the sound of jazz. Jazz becomes a soundtrack of that freedom. But champagne is a drink of that freedom too. So in all the clubs around Montmartre, everybody's drinking champagne, and the champagne industry is just booming. It never had so much popularity. But at Bricktops, they drank whiskey. She had to do it different. Everything she did was different. The people that circled around her made the Black Montmartre what it was today. There were entrepreneurs. There were people just like her. There were musicians. There were dancers, all kinds of people. And they all lived in an inclusive neighborhood that was not, it was called Black Montmartre. But there were regular French people just walking the streets, doing their business, having their, their families living here and there, the music business, the entertainment business, all around this area here. The African Americans ruled because the musicians earned more money. African American musicians were paid more money than the white French musicians because they knew how to play the music, and that was the music that was demanded. The 1920s was a period of flourishing and bringing your talent to the foreground, no matter what you did, whether you were a young writer like Gwendolyn Bennett, or you were a critic, like a journalist like Jessie Fawcett. There was something where you could shine in Paris.
The counterpoint here is what was going on in America during that time. After World War I, we had record lynchings of Black men. We had race riots. And when I say race riots, we had white folk who were burning towns. The Tulsa Massacre occurred in 1921, right after the war. So what Julia talks about in terms of a free-for-all, it represented for Black Americans, especially if you were an entertainer or an artist, opportunities that were unheard of in America. Bricktop had the Prince of Wales hanging out. She had F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway. Just having the idea of doing that could get you lynched. So there was a real sense of freedom politically, not just economically, but political freedom, because America, after the war, after the Black soldiers came back to a country that they had fought for, died for, and ended up being killed by the very people whose democracy they were defending.
Audrey, I actually want to stay with you for a second. After the Brooklyn subway shootings in April, you said, this is it. You're planning to spend more of your time in Paris. What's the upside and the downside to that decision?
Well, let me say, first of all, Europe as a whole, Paris in particular, they don't have guns. And just as race, if that is your obsession, which it is in America, if race is your obsession as a culture, then what comes out of that? Racism. If guns predominate in a culture, what comes out of that? Violence. So when I talk about, is this the hill I want to die on? I'm talking about the violence. Now, the person who did the subway attack, 62-year-old Black man, I'm sure he's mentally ill. The point is, he could get a gun. I have a girlfriend in Harlem who's 80 years old. She's got 2 guns. Why do you have 2 guns? And what happens when you have guns that are in a free-for-all? You have violence.
Thank you, Audrey.
My name is Cynthia Simmons, 72 years old, expat living in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, and loving it here. I had been hearing about San Miguel, Mexico for a very long time. It was known as an arts community. There were painters, was visual artists at first, and then writers started to come. So I knew that this was a creative artist place. And when I got here, it was so easy. You can just take a cab up to a high vista and look down on the town, and it will soothe you. It's a beautiful place to be. When I came, AARP had just written an article saying that San Miguel was the best place to retire in the world. That's when couples started coming, because before that, it was, Black or white, it was primarily women, and women are just more adventurous than men. I think men, they need to be assured of a bit more comfort than they would have going out to some foreign place. I probably would spend a bit more time in the States than I do, but I have no desire whatsoever to live there. I knew that we would have to pay for Obama, but I never thought we would have to pay with Trump. But I think the average, what they call dry, long soul Black person has a harder time in the U.S. now. You know, they're still shooting black men in the back. I don't want to be fighting for the same thing at 72 that I was fighting for at 6. I mean, I will definitely say I'm a better human being than I was when I came.
Julia, your walking tours are a historical and cultural feast for any Black American visitors who want to enjoy Paris and at the same time learn more about who we are. Can you give us a 2-minute PSA, a public service announcement about walking the spirit tours?
They started from me discovering that Langston Hughes lived a couple blocks from me where I was living in Paris. And that was so extraordinary to me that I could walk through this city and find out that I could walk here, there, and everywhere. And all these idols, all these people that I so esteemed had lived here or done something here. And I would have to cross the whole of the United States to get to put all of that together in one little, a couple of square miles. The goal of the tours is to show people that they are seeing one thing, but there's so much that's gone on underneath and that we have so much history there. It's part of your history. And you can claim it as your own because, you walk down the street, there's jazz here, there's jazz everywhere. You remember you could still go to places and see pictures of Obama here, all kinds of things. So, and the history of America is also the history of Black America is taken separately. That history is there, that we've made history, but it's not just, for Black people, it's for people from all different cultures to recognize that the Black history is here and it's deep in the ground. It's not just French history, but wait a minute. Black history, African American history has become French history as well. That's what the Walking the Spirit tours are. It gives you a story. It gives you your story, but it's a story that other people can also admire, understand, and walk through themselves.
That's very affirming. That's very affirming. I don't know anyone who wouldn't want to be in a place that affirms you, contrasted with a place that doesn't.
It also makes the French look good. To embrace the different cultures and to recognize and acknowledge excellence no matter where you're from.
Perfect way to close. Thank you, Audrey Edwards and Julia Brown.
My name is Charlotte Van Horn, founder and CEO of Black Expats in Panama. I once believed that there was no country better than the USA. I think it's just a matter of ignorance, lack of exposure. At that point, I'd hardly been outside of New Jersey. When I was growing up, the only people that I knew traveled internationally went to Vietnam. You got people here in Panama writing, drawing, picking up instruments, and like, wow, I'm good at this. But I just think it's just a whole different lifestyle and vibe. The downsides, number one, it speaks a different language. I am insecure about some dealings because I am still working my Spanish, But at the end of the day, the other side of that is I'm 58 years old. And for me to be learning a language at this time in my life is very good for my mind. We have been coming here since before. I have changed so much in that time, and definitely for the better. There's a whole lot less that bothers me. Depending on your age, that's a big part of it. If you're retirement age, you can let go of a lot of that stuff in the United States and you can live well in other places, even better. But you definitely need to have a plan. But if you really need to make an exodus, you need to look at all of your options. Put all of your options on the table. If you don't have a passport, you're not in the conversation. You just never know what you're going to wake up to. If you're blessed enough to be able to go on a vacation to other places, then when you get there, imagine to yourself, what must it be like to live here? So just put another layer on your travel experience and the information that you want to know about a place when you travel. So open your mind. Being an expat is like being, I'm not talking about giving up your U.S. citizenship. That passport has power. There's a whole lot less that bothers me. To tell you the truth, the whole safety element, feeling safe allows you to feel peaceful. Peaceful is the new wealthy. Money can't buy you that.
Thanks for listening to Unerased Black Women Speak, made possible by support from the Craig Newmark Philanthropies, the Park Foundation, TD Charitable Foundation, and anonymous donors. Our theme song is Unerased by Carolyn Malachi. We had help from Joya Jefferson Nuri, Joshua Levi Perrin, recording engineer Ashley Donald, Alyssa Davis, Alex Kavoris, Jovita Hill, Rosemary Mealy, Marisol Bello, Stephanie Renee, and social media coordinators Antoinette Miner and April McKellar Perry. Our audio producer and host is Carolyn Malachi. Gwen McKinney is our creator and executive producer. All of us at Unerased Black Women Speak invite you to tune in to our next episode. While you're there, please subscribe and visit us online at unerasedbws.com.